This weekend, my parents have invited both me and my wife to join them for a special dinner with other family members to celebrate their 30th wedding anniversary. It's supposed to be a nice family get-together, but honestly, I have mixed feelings about going there. The main reason I'm so hesitant has to do with James. You see, James is my younger brother, and he and I have never been close. Even though we're only 2 years apart, we don't have a strong bond. A lot of that has to do with the way he feels about me. He holds a lot of resentment, and it's been that way since we were kids. Growing up, our parents were really strict, especially our dad. He spent years in the military, and that mindset definitely carried over into how he raised us. He always pushed us to compete against each other. It didn't matter what it was, racing each other to the school bus in the morning or trying to outdo each other in doing chores around the house. Everything felt like a contest between the both of us. It wasn't just about doing your best, it was about doing better than your sibling. In the beginning, I think the competition between James and me wasn't all that bad. It might have even been healthy at first. We were just kids, and a little bit of rivalry can be normal. But as time went on, things started to shift. My brother began to fall behind, especially when it came to school. I was always good with my studies. I'd get straight A's, score high on tests, and bring home report cards my parents could be proud of. Unfortunately, that only made things harder for James. Because I was doing so well, my dad would constantly compare him to me. And when James didn't measure up, he would get harsh punishments. There were nights when he wasn't allowed to eat dinner, and other times when he was forced to stand in a corner for hours until his legs would give out from under him. I could tell how much it hurt him, not just physically, but emotionally too. Dad kept using me as an example. "Look at your brother," he'd say. "Why can't you be more like him?" He even forced me to tutor James, thinking that if I helped him study, his grades would improve. I didn't mind helping, I wanted to, but I could only do so much. The truth was, James didn't enjoy studying. It wasn't his thing. He was more of a playful, active kid who liked being outside, running around, using his imagination. Sitting still with a book just didn't interest him, no matter how hard anyone tried to make it happen. As the years went by, it became more and more obvious that the constant comparisons and pressure had taken a toll on James. He started to resent me, and honestly, I can understand why. He felt like he was always one step behind, always falling short, no matter how hard he tried. And I'll admit something that's hard to say out loud. I was so focused on making our dad proud that I didn't take the time to see what all of that was doing to my younger brother. I never really stopped to think about how it must have felt for him, constantly living in my shadow and getting punished for not being like me. Then, right before I was about to head off to college, something happened that shook our whole family. James did something drastic. He took a full bottle of sleeping pills. It was terrifying. Thankfully, our parents found him in time and rushed him to the hospital. The doctors were able to save him, and for that, I'll always be grateful. But that moment changed everything. It was like someone pulled the blindfold off my parents, especially my dad. For the first time, they realized just how much pain James had been hiding, how deeply he'd been hurting all those years. It took something that serious, something that could have ended in tragedy, for them to finally see the damage that had been building up inside him for so long. After the overdose, things really changed at home. My parents started going to therapy sessions with James to help them understand what he was going through. Ever since then, they've treated him like he's made of glass, like any wrong word or bit of pressure might cause him to break. Over the years, I've also apologized to my brother more than once. I have told him how sorry I am for not being more aware, for not standing up for him when we were younger. I've tried to make things right, at least between the two of us. But even now, so many years later, it still feels like my parents have continued to baby him. They constantly walk on eggshells around him. After high school, when my dad wanted James to pursue college, my brother threatened to take his own life again, as he claimed he couldn't live away from home and didn't really need any higher studies. So he never ended up going. Without a proper degree, James has struggled to get a steady, high-income job. Even when he does get a job, he has issues with holding it down. Either he misses too many days or ends up clashing with co-workers, and eventually he gets fired. It's like a pattern that keeps repeating. He still lives at home, doesn't pay rent, and depends on our parents for everything: groceries, bills, daily expenses, you name it. Just so it's clear, my brother doesn't have any diagnosed mental illness right now. He goes to therapy from time to time, and aside from the depression he went through back then, he's okay now. He's functional. He's not struggling the way he used to. In fact, he has a solid group of friends he hangs out with every day. They smoke together, drink, go out to parties. It's not like he's sitting at home, withdrawn or isolated. He's living his life. The only catch is he's doing it all on my parents' dime. And I think that's what frustrates me the most. My parents never push him, never challenge him, never ask him to step up. They're scared, and I get that. They're terrified of pushing him too far, of losing him again, and he knows that. He knows exactly how to play into that fear. Sometimes it really feels like he's using it to his advantage. Because of all this, I have always felt really bad for my parents. So when they started asking me to send them money back home to help them with their daily expenses, I couldn't refuse them. I know they're retired now and don't have the same income they once did. And with James not contributing anything, I feel like it's the least I can do to support them, as this situation is hard on them. Ever since then, every month, I have sent money to help out, while my brother lives like he doesn't have a care in the world. And it's gotten to the point where I feel like I have to pick up the slack in the family. Now, my wife knows all my family history. She dislikes my brother strongly, and it's not just because he's a deadbeat son to my parents, but also because he's made her feel deeply uncomfortable on multiple occasions. You see, James constantly flirts with my wife. From the day he met her, he has always acted overly affectionate towards her, tries to be touchy-feely around her, and even makes suggestive comments that are totally inappropriate. He does it under the guise of being playful or friendly, and if I call him out on it, he shrugs it off, laughs, and acts like I'm overreacting. What makes it worse is how my parents respond to these situations. They don't see it for what it really is. Instead of calling James out or backing me up, they dismiss it completely. They say it's just a harmless crush, like it's some innocent schoolboy thing. Sometimes they even make little comments that feel like they're subtly encouraging it. For example, when my wife met my parents for the very first time, it was supposed to be a warm, welcoming occasion, you know? That typical meet the family kind of thing. But while we were all sitting together chatting, out of nowhere, my mom told my wife, who was then just a girlfriend, something like, "You were so funny. You know, you'd actually be a much better match for my other son, James. You two have the same kind of humor." She even laughed a little as she said this, like she thought it was a funny, harmless comment. Then my dad chimed in, agreeing with her. He said to my wife something along the lines of, "Yeah, James is a hoot. You'll probably have more fun with someone like him." I remember just sitting there wondering if I had heard them right. Why were they trying to link my brother and my partner? Who would even say such a thing to someone's partner? Because me and my wife were both so taken aback by their comments at first that we thought maybe they were just joking and tried to laugh it off. But over the years, my parents have continued to bring up the idea that my wife would have been a better match for my brother. It's like this running theme they've never let go of. Over and over again, they've said things like, "She's so much more like James," or commenting about how my wife and James have such similar personalities, as if that somehow means she ended up with the wrong son. Even on our wedding day, just before the ceremony, my mom pulled my wife aside and actually asked her, "Are you sure you want to marry him?" She said it as if she was giving my partner one last chance to back out, like she was hoping my wife would change her mind and run away. Can you imagine how crushing that was to hear on our wedding day? I had a huge fight with my parents regarding this and almost cut them off from my life back then, but then they half-heartedly apologized, promising that they would never speak that way to my wife again. However, every year on my brother's birthday, they go out of their way to get my wife to stand next to him for photos or videos. It doesn't matter how uncomfortable it makes us. They'll say things like, "Come on, you two look so good in pictures together," or "Just one photo, don't be so stiff." It's subtle, but it's constant. And no matter how many times we try to brush it off or politely shift the situation, it keeps happening. Whenever we've brought this up and whenever we've tried to have an honest conversation about how uncomfortable all of this makes us, my parents have just brushed it off like it's nothing. My mom always tries to justify it by saying that my brother has never had a proper girlfriend, so he's just infatuated with my wife because she's so pretty and likes to stand next to her. My dad isn't much better. He says things like, "What's the harm in standing next to him for a photo if it makes your brother happy?" He genuinely believes it's not a big deal, that it's just a small thing, but it's not. Eventually, we just had enough. After one too many times of being made to feel uncomfortable and ignored, we have stopped going to family events that involve my brother. No birthdays, no get-togethers, nothing. We have pulled back completely. I have also stopped visiting my parents altogether, and so has my wife. However, my mother is insisting that we attend this time because she's invited all my cousins and distant relatives, and she doesn't want me to skip it as people might start asking questions. AITA if I still don't attend? Update 1. Thank you all for the comments. The truth is, I still haven't decided whether I'm going to attend the upcoming family event or not. I've been going back and forth in my head about it, and part of me feels like maybe I should go, just for the chance of meeting other family members, but the other part of me keeps thinking about everything that's happened over the years and how they've treated my wife and the way they've always made excuses for my brother and how they continue to brush off our boundaries like they don't matter. Do I go and pretend everything's fine just to keep the peace, or do I stay away to protect the little peace we've managed to build for ourselves? So yeah, I'm still on the fence. Update 2. Okay, so we decided to go for my parents' wedding anniversary, and it was honestly a big mistake. During the event, my parents were clearly thrilled to see me. My mom hugged me tightly and said she honestly didn't think I would come and how happy she was that I did. I just nodded and smiled. Everything was going fairly smoothly until dinner. We were all seated around the table, catching up, making small talk. Then one of my aunts casually mentioned how all the cousins were either married or in relationships, except my brother James. She laughed a little and asked him half-jokingly why he was still single and if he was perhaps dating someone he might want to marry soon. My brother just smiled awkwardly and blushed as if he were trying to hide something. Then one of the cousins playfully shouted, "Come on, James, spill it. Do you have a crush or what?" That's when my mom, without missing a beat, said loudly, "Oh, I don't know about a girlfriend, but he does have a huge crush on his brother's wife." She then pointed her finger at my wife and laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. My dad joined in, laughing even louder. My wife and I both froze. I stared up from my plate, my jaw tight, locking eyes with my mother, but she didn't even notice. She was too busy laughing and talking to my aunt, saying something about how my brother had been enthralled by my wife for so many years, like it was some kind of romantic movie plot and not a completely inappropriate obsession to be obsessed with your own brother's wife. Then, as if that wasn't enough, my aunt turned to my wife and asked loudly and without thinking, "Do you have any sisters or female cousins James could maybe date?" And some of the relatives actually laughed hearing this. My brother just sat there blushing, grinning slightly like this whole thing was totally normal. He didn't try to shut my parents down. He didn't try to steer the conversation away. He just sat there soaking in the attention like it was flattering. I could feel the heat rising in my face. I turned to look at my wife as she sat there looking embarrassed and humiliated. This was the last straw. I didn't even think, I just snapped. I raised my voice loud enough for everyone at the table to hear, and I turned to my mother and said, "How dare you talk about my wife like this?" The whole table went quiet. You could have heard a pin drop. I looked at both my mom and dad and said, "You promised me, both of you, that you wouldn't cross this line again. You swore that you'd respect our boundaries and stop putting us in uncomfortable situations. But here we are again. You're laughing about my brother having a crush on my wife. You think this is funny?" My voice was shaking, but I didn't care. Then I turned to the rest of the table, my cousins, aunts, uncles, and I said, "Let me ask you all something. How many of you think it's okay for someone to openly say they have a crush on their own sibling's partner, and for the whole family to laugh about it like it's some kind of sitcom scene? Do you think this is normal?" No one said a word. My aunt's smile was wiped off her face. A few others just awkwardly sipped their drinks. Suddenly, no one had an answer. I then turned to my brother and I just let it all out. "You've been acting like a creep around my wife for years," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "You flirt with her every time we're around. You've sent her late-night texts even though she's never replied. You try to stand too close to her, touch her when she's clearly uncomfortable, and act like it's all a joke." My brother's face dropped instantly. I looked around at the table and continued, "And you all think this is funny? You really think it's okay for someone to act this way toward their brother's wife?" I turned to my parents and said, "And you two, how many times have you made comments about how my wife and James would be such a good match? You've been doing this for years. You even said stuff like this at our wedding. Do you even realize how messed up that is? How incredibly disrespectful it is, not just to me, but to my wife?" Everyone was dead silent. I was pissed at my aunt too for going along with my mother's joke, so I looked directly at her and asked, "Would you ever say this kind of stuff about your own son's partner? Would you tell your daughter-in-law that she'd be a better fit for someone else in the family? Would you let your son act like that around someone else's wife?" She looked stunned, and then slowly she shook her head. "Exactly," I said. "So why are you okay when my parents are doing it to me?" You could feel the room shrinking into itself. Everyone was uncomfortable now, not because of me, but because I said what needed to be said. What everyone probably already knew deep down, but had chosen to ignore. My parents sat there completely stunned. My dad looked like he was about to explode, his face red, fists clenched on the table. My mother, on the other hand, started panicking. She tried to laugh it off, her voice shaky, saying, "I didn't mean anything by it. Come on, it's not that serious. It's just a harmless crush. We've always just joked like that about your wife and James. I'm sorry, but it is just funny and I wasn't really trying to offend anyone." That's when my wife, who had been sitting next to me all evening, silent and humiliated, finally snapped at my mother. She pushed her chair back slightly and looked directly at my mother. Her voice was calm but loud and cutting, clear enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, I get it now," she said. "Since everything's just a joke to you, I guess cheating on your husband all those years ago was just fun too, right?" My mother froze, eyes wide. I mean, my wife continued, her voice getting sharper, I guess you had a harmless crush on the neighbor too, right? And I guess when you decided to sleep with him, it didn't mean anything. It was just for fun, wasn't it? The entire room went dead silent. My dad looked like he'd been punched in the stomach, and my mother looked completely gutted. My mother went white in the face. I couldn't stop myself from letting out a satisfied laugh. What my wife had said was absolutely true. This was an ugly little secret my parents had buried for years and kept it from everyone. Long ago, my mother had cheated on my father with their neighbor. When he found out, she begged him not to leave. He stayed just for me and my brother. Over time, he seemed to have forgiven her, or at least has moved past it. But my wife knows this truth because I had told her. She had held it for many years. Now, finally, she had turned that truth around and used it to hit back hard at my mom for always hurting her. She had taken years of pain, years of inappropriate comments, weird jokes, and watching my parents treat her more like a prize for my brother than my partner. And she finally used the one thing she knew would shut it all down. My mom snapped out of her shock and immediately started yelling at my wife. She screamed that my wife had no right to throw that old affair in her face and that she had crossed a line. My dad joined in, raising his voice too, calling it disrespectful and unnecessary to bring the past up. But I wasn't having any of that. I stood up and yelled right back. You crossed the line the moment you made my wife the punchline to your creepy jokes. The moment you kept defending James like he was some kind of harmless little boy when he's been making my wife uncomfortable for years. Don't you dare talk about disrespect when you've disrespected our marriage over and over again. My mom started to cry in front of everyone, trying to spin it around like she was the victim now. But people were still processing the fact that my mother had cheated on my dad when everyone had thought of them as the perfect couple. James finally opened his mouth, only to shout at me for ruining the party. You always have to make everything about you, he yelled. I just stared at him, stunned that after everything, this was what he took away from it. You think I'm the one making this about me? I said, my voice calm but firm. You sat there and let Mom announce your crush on my wife like it was some joke. You didn't say a word to stop it. You blushed like it wasn't disgusting. You let them humiliate me and my wife again in front of everyone, and now you're mad at me for standing up? He rolled his eyes and waved his arms around dramatically. Oh, please, you always act like the victim. No one even said anything that bad. As my parents and James kept shouting and throwing blame around, my wife and I decided to leave. The yelling didn't seem like it was going to stop anytime soon, and honestly, what was the point of staying there any longer? It was clear they weren't interested in listening or understanding where we were coming from. They just wanted to be angry and play the victims. So without another word, we quietly picked up our things and walked out. We're done, I announced before leaving. Don't dare to contact us unless you all grow up and are ready to take some accountability. Since that night, my phone has been buzzing constantly. Most of them from my mom, a few from my dad too. They're full of anger and guilt tripping. They keep saying that my wife and I had no right to expose Mom's cheating, especially in front of the whole family. According to them, we completely destroyed their so-called picture-perfect marriage by exposing my mom's affair to everyone. My mom in particular has been relentless. She says she's been humiliated and that everyone is now looking at her differently and that we've shattered her reputation. And because of all this, my mom now expects my wife to publicly apologize to her for what she said during dinner. My mom truly believes that my wife owes her an apology for calling out her hypocrisy and for bringing up something that, according to her, should have stayed in the past. It's honestly exhausting. Update 3. After days of back and forth in my own head, I finally picked up the phone and called my parents. I knew the conversation wouldn't go well, but I also knew I had to say what needed to be said clearly and directly. I told them, calmly but firmly, that after everything they had said and done, not just during that awful dinner, but over the years, I couldn't keep pretending like things were okay between us. I told them that my wife and I were tired of feeling disrespected. I explained that I had spent years trying to keep the peace, sending money every single month to help them out, not just because they had asked, but because I also genuinely wanted to help. I thought it was the right thing to do. I wanted to support them because they're my parents, and because James was clearly not contributing anything. But now, after seeing the way they have kept treating us, after all the humiliation and the clear favoritism and complete lack of accountability, I told them I could no longer continue. I told them I would be cutting off all contact. No more phone calls, no more visits, and no more financial support. I said that this was the only way forward for me and my wife to heal and live in peace. My parents didn't take it well at all. The moment I said I'd be cutting them off financially, they completely lost it. My mother started yelling, calling me ungrateful, and accusing me of abandoning my family. My dad jumped in, saying I was turning my back on the people who raised me for years. They kept saying I was taking things too far over something they still claimed was just a joke. Not once did they accept their mistakes or even apologize. My mom even accused my wife of turning me against them, as if I'm too weak-minded to make my own decisions. They cursed me, literally, and said I would regret this for the rest of my life when my wife would eventually leave me. It was brutal to hear, but I didn't waver. I stood my ground, and then I ended the call. Since then, my wife and I have blocked them. Update 4. It's been almost 3 months since my last update, and a lot has happened since then. First of all, despite cutting my brother off and warning him multiple times, James has continued to send my wife creepy, unsolicited love letters. Even after our threats to involve the police, he just didn't seem to care. Then, a month ago, my wife and I received some incredible news. We are pregnant and expecting a baby. We were overjoyed and shared the happy news on social media. This was clearly a huge mistake because earlier this week, things took a terrifying turn. My wife came home from work and was shocked to find James sitting on our porch waiting for her. He started to get up as soon as she saw him. She immediately felt unsafe, so she ran back to her car and started driving away as he ran towards the car and begged her to stay and talk with him. I can't even begin to explain the panic that she must have felt at that moment. She called me and I rushed home as fast as I could. We both called the police right away, but unfortunately, since James hasn't technically broken any laws yet, like attacking my wife or breaking into our home, they couldn't arrest him. According to the police, he hasn't actually committed any crime, just persistent harassment. So they let him off with a warning, and that's the part that frustrates me to no end. He's crossing so many lines, but the law can't seem to do much until it's too late. However, we did speak to a lawyer, and he's helping us file a restraining order against my brother. My wife no longer feels safe in our current home. I also don't want to put her or our unborn child at risk in case James decides to show up again. So we've decided to sell our house and move to a new city away from all of this madness before our baby is born. I'm beyond pissed off and exhausted. This situation is out of control, and I'm doing everything I can to protect my wife and child. I can't let anything happen to them. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.